Hey, good morning to everybody. Happy Thursday. It's Daryl here. It is bright and freaking early, man. It's 3 a.m. here in Connecticut on the East Coast. Okay, a lot of times I come across a story in the morning and I will have direct experience or knowledge of the story. These are the stories I look for. I actually had one commenter that kept commenting. He was like, "Oh, I bet you Daryl's going to say that he has experience with this," or and he kind of made fun of this. And I responded. I was like, "Dude, that's kind of the point of my channel. I find stories that I could purposely that I could share my experience, my insight, my opinion, direct experience. That I could contribute to the story." And I found a story this morning. Okay, I think I'm debating what to call this. I was going to call this, talk about maybe feeding poor kids. We see these stories about how there's a ever widening gap in this country between the top 1%, like the billionaires that have ungodly money. They have money that they could never spend, Their kids, their grandkids, their great-great-grandkids will never be able to spend. We're talking like, $300 billion, $100 billion. People with gold toilets. People with just ungodly amounts of money. And then I read stories about Republicans denying kids the ability to, poor families, the ability to feed themselves, to buy food over the summer, to eat healthy meals. And this, we're talking about money that's already put aside by the government for states. It's already set aside. And states like Kansas that are prohibiting their family and children's services from using this money. They're prohibiting the state from using money to feed the kids in their state for no other reason than we don't do free lunches or government money makes people lazy or fraud or something like that. I'm thinking about calling this. I was thinking about calling this Republicans refuse to feed the poor, or refuse to fund children's meals. But you know what? I think I might just call this video just a video for the people of Kansas. I really hope that the people of Kansas watch this video, specifically Republicans or Democrats or independents. I often wonder, I've talked about this on lots of videos, why it is I'm a 58-year-old male, mostly white, half Native American, and the vast majority of Generation X males are Trumpers, are Republicans these days. That's what I found. And I am in the minority. I wonder why that is. And today's video might have something to do with that. Let me just give you, I'm going to try to make this short, how I grew up. All right, and I'm trying to make this short. My family, my mom's family, my father's family were both working middle-class families. My grandfather on my mother's side was an engineer, did engineering. He worked for actual trains, with trains in Hartford, Connecticut, and Maine. My father's side, my father actually worked for Seth Thomas Clocks. He was a carpenter. He built the actual wood for the grandfather clocks in the Seth Thomas factory in Thomaston, Connecticut. Solid working middle-class families, lower middle, working week-to-week families. And my father was a hard-working man. My mother was a stay-at-home mom. My father worked 2 jobs. He died when I was 9, but before he died, he worked for the, he brought jail prisoners to work for, they had a prison construction team, and he would be in charge of prisoners to bring them to build bridges out in the woods, to construct trails. He was a forest firefighter, and he eventually got tapped to be the ranger in a state park. So, I remember him at I was 7 or 8 years old. He was so excited, because then we moved into the state house inside the park. There was this, it was inside the park, and he ran the whole park. He was the ranger, the man in charge of all the construction, everything like that. And he still worked a part-time job at night doing janitor service just to make extra money on top of this good job. He worked 2 jobs all through the day and all through the night. A hard-working man. Okay, and when I was about 8 or 9 years old, I remember he started getting double vision. I remember they started sending me out. Like my father would all of a sudden get very sick, and my mom would rush me outside, and the ambulance would come and take my father away. He was having convulsions. He got terminal brain cancer, malignant terminal brain cancer. I learned those words when I was 8, 9 years old. He passed away when I was 9 years old. Okay, that left me at 9 years old and my sister at 3 years old and my mother, who had no experience working, no schooling. She was a stay-at-home mom, living in a state house that my father no longer had the job for them. My father was gone. So at 9 years old, I remember worrying about being homeless. Because even at 9 years old, I knew I could hear the adults whisper, well, what's going to become of us? Dad's gone. He's no longer doing this job that the house came with. Where are we going to go? And my mother has no experience, no job, and 2 kids, a 3-year-old, my sister, and a 9-year-old to feed. I remember going to school. And before all this happened, I remember kids getting reduced lunches, being on the food programs. They had a little ticket where they would pay like just a nickel or they get free milk, or they get a whole free meal. And I remember us other kids were like, those are the poor kids. The poor kids that had the scraggly clothes and looked kind of dirty or something like that. And they were, there was those kids. And then I became one of those kids. Not dirty or not with the clothes, but I became one of those kids that, my mother needed that assistance. My mother needed that Social Security. Without that, I don't know how she would ever fed us. Maybe this is why I'm more receptive to these ideas. Because, like I said, my mother went on to put herself through school for nursing. Became an assistant nurse. She eventually ended up retiring from the post office. She was for 20 years. She worked for the post office, a postal delivery person, and it was a great job, a good paying job. And she ended up getting remarried to another postman. So it was a happy ending. But looking back, there was no fraud involved. There was no, we needed that money. Not only that, I remember, this was back in 1975. My father died when he was 32 years old, just 32 years old, just starting out. A 9-year-old boy and a 3-year-old, my sister. So he didn't have a whole lot of money saved. I remember using the money that I got from Social Security to actually put myself through school, through technical school after high school, that actually got me into architectural drafting. It was only like $6,000, but that paid for my tuition to put myself through college or technical school after high school. And that got me to, without these free lunch programs or this assistance, God knows, we would have been homeless. And even as a 9-year-old, I remember being terrified of being homeless. I remember people whispering, that my father was going to die, that my father was a vegetable. I remember worrying about being homeless, 8, 9-year-old boy, and I remember being terrified of this stuff. And if it wasn't for assistant programs like this, we would have been screwed. We would have been living on the sidewalk. So for the people of Kansas, do not let, this guy is a Representative Francis Awerkamp from Kansas. And he passed House Bill 2674, prohibiting his Department of Family and Children's Services from taking any money from the government to feed children throughout the summer, for no other reason than just to be cruel, to be, I don't know. I think this is why I'm a Democrat, why I'm a liberal. Okay, let me talk about this real quick too. I'm up to 9 minutes. They mentioned fraud in this article. This is one of the reasons why Republicans don't want to fund this. Well, there's a lot of fraud, or people are lazy or whatever. I was an addict. Okay, and I remember going back. I was a heroin addict for 2 decades of my life, a crack using heroin addict. And I remember the original food stamps, the ones on paper where they were like tickets. And I remember there being fraud with those. I remember using those to trade for money to buy my stuff. Those were done away with a long time ago. Now there's Snap cards, Snap like credit cards. And I was, like I said, I was using up to 17 and a half years ago, up until 2006, I was using, and it was extremely hard. I know because me and my friends tried to commit these acts, tried to use these cards to get money. And it was extremely hard to do that. We tried going into the stores and trading them for money, and the people, they would just tell us to get out of the store. That people, they had cameras, they had people coming in and checking everything from the state or the federal government, and they wanted nothing to do with this. There was one scam that we used to be able to get away with, where we would go to bodegas, and it was just very few, like maybe 2 bodegas in a city, like the city of Hartford, that we knew of. We'd go in, we'd ask them if they needed baby formula. And the deal was we would take these cards, and it took so much footwork. And as an addict, I didn't even want to do this. It took so much driving back and forth. We'd have to go to the convenience store first, find the convenience store, and make the deal. Say, look, if we go buy this baby formula, will you buy them from us? And they say, yeah, we'll take, you go buy these baby formulas for $8 a piece, $10 a piece, and we will buy them from you for $2 a piece. So then we would drive to the supermarket, and we'd go in there with a carriage and load up baby formula, fill up the carriage, $150 worth of baby formula, pay for it with the card. Then get back in the car, drive it back down to the bodega, take it in, and we get $35 for $150 worth of baby formula. And that, from what I understand, that's even stopped now. This was 17 or 18 years ago, 20 years ago that we used to do this. Now, the stores and the state has gotten savvy to this, and they've put baby formula behind. A lot of it was getting shoplifted too, and they put it behind. You have to actually ask for it now. So people like I used to be can't go in there and just dump in fill up a carriage full of baby formula and try to run out the door with it, or try to go use the food cart to buy it, because it's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. You're obviously committing fraud, and they put a stop to that. So even as a person that used to, unfortunately, that's not something I'm proud of. It was very hard, and believe me, a heroin addict knows how to commit fraud, and it was very hard to do that back 20 years ago. So now I don't know how there could possibly be any fraud with this. So that's just not an argument. If it wasn't for these programs, I don't know where me or my sister would be. Would have ended up. We would have ended up living on the sidewalk, hungry. And we weren't lazy. We weren't anything. We were a regular American working class family that all of a sudden the breadwinner got terminal brain cancer, and 6 months later he was gone, leaving my mother, my 3-year-old sister, and me, 9 years old, with no source of income. And eventually we got kicked out of the house, and my mother actually started working as a assistant nurse and actually bought a home when I was 14 years old. And we actually worked our way up. But without Social Security and these programs, we would have been screwed. And so, to the people of Kansas, there's my story. That's my story, 100% true. Think twice before you deny hungry children summer food for the summer. And people like billionaires. Donald Trump is now in court arguing that how much his Mar-a-Lago estate is worth. That's worth it. People say it's only worth $30 billion when it's actually worth $50 billion. Are you kidding me? There's people like this in the United States that are proud and arguing how many billions of dollars their mansions are worth, and you can't afford to feed some hungry kids like I used to be. After my father passed away from brain cancer, you can't shell out some money for a lunch for hungry kids? Are you? Is that where the United States is right now? Is that the country that you want to live in? All right, that's my video. I'll be back later with another video. You guys, the story's right down below, so you can read the story for yourselves. I'll put it right on top. Have a good Thursday.